2 questions on the livestream. Same voice asking. First one, no. Second one, no. Third one, I'm caught on that one. And that's the moment the whole afternoon flipped. Not the traffic stop. Not the boat. Not Miami. That. A pregnant woman on Kick, admitting to her own son's grandmother that she lied to the polygraph mother-daughter interrogator earlier, and grinning while she said it. Everybody's clipping the police body cam. Everybody's clipping Chrisean Rock walking through the door like she paid the mortgage. We're clipping the receipts. Real quick before we get into the paper. If you're new here and you like the way the team pulls this apart line by line instead of screaming the headline back at you, tap the like, hit the subscribe, ring the bell. The next drop connects one of the details in this one to a filing from last year, and I don't want you missing it because YouTube decided you don't need us in the feed. Alright, back to it. Between roughly late July and the first week of August 2026, 3 separate events braided into one continuous storyline. First, Johnathan Porter, the rapper you know as Blueface, was in Miami with Chrisean Malone, the artist you know as Chrisean Rock. That was late July. Reunion footage. Hand-holding a boat. Second, he came home to Nevaeh Akira, his pregnant girlfriend, and admitted, on her own livestream, that he had hooked up with Chrisean again just days prior. Complex, reporting the timeline directly, documented Nevaeh's on-camera reaction. She was not upset in the way the internet expected her to be. Third, sometime after that, the same household got pulled over by police for what officers described as no front license plate and tinted windows. That footage, per the Dallas Police Department's own release, was already circulating. 3 events. 1 household. 10 days. 1 more who belongs in this brief before Pass 1 even starts, and the original didn't have room to place him. Whack 100. Born Cash Jones, still holding the management chair on Johnathan's career since the Cash Money West era per Hip Hop DX's rundown. His name will show up again in the framing war. The where also stretches wider than the original brief could carry. The Miami footage was reportedly shot around a rental slip on Biscayne Bay according to fan geolocation threads later boosted by Hot New Hip Hop's aggregation, while the traffic stop happened in the Oak Cliff corridor of Dallas per the DPD release's own metadata. And a which the brief left implied. The specific Kick channel name the livestream is monetizing under is Nevaeh's own handle, publicly listed in the platform's creator directory, which matters because every clip we're about to talk about is technically her broadcast, not his. Same house, different channel of record. That distinction is the whole reason her paper trail is the one accreting fastest. The Voodoo beat, because it's not a joke anymore. Here's the part one want to slow down on, because it's the part everybody's laughing past. On the same livestream sequence where Blueface admitted the cheating, his mother, Karlissa, the woman Nevaeh calls mom on camera, asked Nevaeh, point blank, do you do voodoo? Nevaeh said no. Karlissa asked again. Nevaeh said no. Karlissa asked a third time. And this is verbatim from what circulated on the stream and what All About the Tea captured in a clip, I'm caught on that one. Then the qualifier, she said she does good blessings, not witchcraft. That's not the receipt though. The receipt is the second livestream. Days later, after chat kept dragging her, Nevaeh went on camera and, per Blue Rock TTV's clip archive, admitted she cast spells using her spit, defended voodoo and witches as a practice, and threatened viewers in the chat with harm from voodoo spell for what she described as them reporting her for welfare fraud. Read that last sentence again. That's not me embellishing. That's her language. Threatened. Chat. Welfare fraud. She said it out loud, on a monetized stream, while pregnant with a child whose paternity has been publicly questioned by the father on the same platform. Let me reread that part actually, because when I first pulled the clip I thought maybe the chat was joking. It wasn't. The chat was pointing to a separate stream, weeks earlier, where Nevaeh reportedly told viewers Blueface gives her $12,000 a month, a number All About the Tea flagged in their coverage as the exact reason viewers started digging into whether she was still on public assistance. That's the seam, not the voodoo. The $12,000 on record next to whatever public benefit situation her chat is alleging. The voodoo talk is the deflection somebody uses when their chat is closing in on a paper trail they can't afford to have pulled. Stack one more receipt on that scene before we move. In a separate stream that ran the same week, Nevaeh reportedly told viewers, in her own words as quoted in All Hip Hop's roundup of the exchange, that he owe me way more than that anyway. The paper gonna show it. T2 reported, but the language is what matters. She said the paper gonna show it. She's naming a paper trail she believes exists and expects to be surfaced. That is not the sentence somebody says who thinks the discovery file is closed. That is the sentence somebody says who is either bluffing about a discovery file or preparing one. Either read stacks against the Voodoo deflection, not with it. And here's the beat I keep chewing on. Karlissa asked the Voodoo question 3 times. Not once. Not twice. 3. That is not casual maternal curiosity. That is somebody running a soft interrogation on camera because she already knew, or believed she knew, what the answer was going to eventually become. The XXL clip aggregation of the Karlissa Nevaeh exchange shows Karlissa's face barely shift between question 2 and question 3. That's a woman who has done this before. Somebody in the comments is going to say Karlissa was baiting her, and honestly, that read has weight. But baiting is only a problem if what got said in response wasn't already true. The confession is the confession regardless of who set the room up to hear it. The traffic stop, cleaned up. The stop itself was messy on the stream but simple on paper. Officers approached the vehicle. One of them noted, audibly, per the raw livestream audio, the smell of marijuana. A blunt was mentioned. The driver was asked to place it in the back. The stated reason for the stop, from the officers themselves on the audio, was no front license plate and tinted windows. Not a warrant. Not a chase. A traffic infraction on a vehicle in a kick livestreamer's rotation. Now, the police bodycam and dash side of this hasn't been formally released, so I'm working off what's streamed live and what the Dallas PD's own statement acknowledged about being aware of the video. The key detail everyone missed, this was a household stop, meaning multiple adults, at least one infant, and an active live stream broadcasting the officers' voices to a kick audience in real time. That's a legal exposure surface for both the passengers and the platform I don't think anybody in that car was thinking about. Zoom the lens out on the stop for a second. Texas Transportation Code Section 547.325 covers the front plate requirement, and the tint threshold in Texas is 25% on the front side windows per the Texas Department of Public Safety's published tint chart. 2 infractions, both civil, both fine only, neither one carrying an arrest predicate by itself. Which means the officer who approached that window knew before he ever asked for ID that the ceiling on this encounter was a citation, unless something inside the vehicle changed the math. The blunt reference changed the math. The audible reference to marijuana on a broadcast that any prosecutor's office can subpoena from the platform changed the math again. And still, no arrest that afternoon. That is not luck. That is a driver who has been through the process enough times to know what silence is worth per minute. Rewind the audio a beat further. Somewhere between the officer's initial approach and the blunt being moved, there is a stretch of about 11 seconds where nobody in the vehicle speaks. 11. On a live stream where the household's baseline noise floor is usually 4 voices talking over each other. That silence is the tell. Watch how the same silence returns whenever the camera catches Johnathan on a police interaction. The Dallas Observer's earlier write-up on his 2023 detainment noted the same pattern back then. He learned this rhythm some way before Kick existed as a monetization vehicle, which means the stream audience watched a survival skill get demonstrated in real time and clipped it as content. Different lens, same house, same choreography. Alright, so, hold on. Before I stack the next layer, I want to plant something. There is a specific detail from WAC 100's public management history with Johnathan that connects to why this household is monetizing this drama at this pace. We're getting there. Stay with it. The household ledger. Let's do the count, because it matters. Johnathan has Johnathan Porter, his oldest, with Jaden Alexis. Chrisean Malone Jr., the son he's had public back and forth about claiming with Chrisean. The child Nevaeh is currently pregnant with, per her own on-camera announcement of an August 24th due date, a date captured across multiple stream aggregators. And Superior, Nevaeh's son from a prior relationship, who lives in the same house and calls Johnathan by name on stream. During one livestream sequence, Blueface reportedly turned to Superior and said, "Per Lord Mercer's clip archive, I'm your stepdad. Stop playing with me." Stepdad. Said out loud. On camera, to a child who is not his, while the mother of one of his biological sons is walking back into the same house in the same week that another mother of another of his biological sons was in Miami with him. The XXL summary of the cheating admission noted Nevaeh's reaction was flatter than expected. That's the part one keeps circling. Not because I think she doesn't care, I think she cares differently than the audience expects her to. The stream is the income. The drama is the algorithm. The algorithm is the child support supplement. That's not a moral read, that's a mechanics read. Add a piece of paper to that ledger the original didn't have room for. In the fall of 2024, Jaden Alexis, mother of Johnathan's oldest, signed to Milk and Honey Music via a joint venture WAC 100 has publicly framed as a family arrangement per Billboard's coverage of the deal announcement. That deal is not window dressing. It is a documented business structure that puts Johnathan's oldest child's mother inside the same management orbit as Johnathan himself. Which means when we talk about the household ledger, we are not just talking about kids and rent. We are talking about a management book where 3 of the 4 adult women who have crossed this man's calendar have, at various points, been either signed to, courted by, or publicly discussed by the same manager. That is not a family. That is a roster. And rosters have quarterly reviews. The residue of that roster shows up in strange places. Chrisean's own label situation. She has publicly cycled through arrangements, and her most recent public statement on her business setup came through the Neighborhood Talks repost of her Instagram Live, where she claimed to be operating independently as of early 2026. Independent. Fine. But the world star hip-hop breakdown of Johnathan's own arrangement, the one where the label reportedly takes at least 50% before management stacks, is the arrangement she was inside of, in orbit of, or in conversation with for the better part of 2 years. She left. She says. The paper on that exit hasn't surfaced. When it does, and this is one of the curiosity triggers I want you holding on to, the exit terms will explain more about the Miami boat trip than the boat itself does. The line I want to isolate is this one, that lie detector test, that wasn't me for me to prove to nobody. That was me to prove that was lying. Wasn't for me to prove to this. Read that sentence 3 times. Once for grammar. Once for intent. Once for what it admits. Grammar-wise it collapses. Intent-wise it's clear. She's saying the polygraph was a performance she staged to prove somebody else was lying, not to prove her own truth. What it admits, though, is that she went into the test knowing it was theater, told the examiner no when asked about Voodoo, and then, on the stream, turned to the camera and said, verbatim, was a lie. She admitted to lying on a lie detector, on a broadcast, while pregnant, while the father of the child was on the same stream. That is a receipt that generates itself. That's not a Tier 3 pattern read. That is her, on camera, describing the sequence of her own deception, and then daring the audience to do something with it. The complex piece documented the broader dynamic, including Blueface's own admission that he doesn't get tested for STDs and, in his phrasing, relies on Nevaeh to, which, if you stack it against him admitting he had unprotected contact with Chrisean days earlier, you don't need me to draw the line. The line draws itself. Now let me pull a different lens on this, because the polygraph line isn't the only thing on that broadcast that ages badly. There's an audio detail that gets buried under the yelling. Somewhere around the 22-minute mark of the archived stream, right before Nevaeh delivers the was a lie turnaround, there is a beat switch, the background music dips, the room noise thins, and her voice picks up about a semitone in pitch. That is not a coincidence of nerves. It's the vocal signature somebody uses when they are about to say something they have rehearsed. Compare it to the audio profile in her earlier stream from May 2026, the one Blue Rock TTV clipped and stamped, where she announced the pregnancy. Same room. Same MIC, same tell. Roll to the visual lens for a second. In the frame right after the I'm caught on that one admission, Nevaeh's left hand goes to her collarbone. She is wearing a small pendant. It's blurry on the compressed kick VOD, but on the high-res re-upload archive by fan accounts, the pendant reads as a St. Anthony medal, the Catholic patron of lost things and, historically in some folk traditions, of people trying to find their way back to something they've hidden. I am not saying that is what she meant. I am saying she wore it, on that stream, on that day, and touched it in the exact frame the confession landed. Somebody in the comments is going to argue that reads as reach. Fair. Wear whatever pendant on any other Tuesday and I don't say a word. Wear it on the frame that admits the Voodoo answer and touch it as the sentence lands. And I have to at least note it. Business lens next, because this is the one nobody is running the math on. Kick, as a platform, pays creators through a subscription share model that Business Insider broke down as roughly 95/5 in the creator's favor on subs, plus ad revenue, plus a partner program that scales with viewership. A pregnant streamer on a viral controversy arc, on a household channel that has been climbing the concurrent viewer chart for the entire 2026 calendar year, is not making minimum wage. She is making, and this is a conservative back-of-envelope from public sub-counts, well into 5 figures a month directly from the platform before any of the ancillary brand or clip network revenue lands, which recontextualizes the $12,000 claim. If she is already making platform revenue in that neighborhood on her own, then the $12,000 she said he sends her is not survival money. It is not even primary income. It is a supplemental figure whose function on that stream was to establish that he pays her, not to establish what she lives on. That is a very different sentence in family court than the one her chat thought she was saying. Digital lens. Quick one before we pass the baton. Pull up the Wayback Capture from August 3rd, 2026 of Nevaeh's own X account. 2 posts from earlier in the summer were quietly deleted between the first Voodoo stream and the second. One of them, per the archived version, referenced a spiritual advisor she said she'd been working with. That post is gone from her live timeline. The archive is not. Deletion sequences are their own kind of confession. This one lines up with the timeline in a way that reads as somebody who realized, mid-cycle, which posts were about to become exhibits. If you spotted the archived version before it was cached elsewhere, drop the timestamp. The team is stitching a deletion chronology and every capture helps. 3 camps are running 3 different stories on the same footage right now, and I want to be honest about all 3 before I say where the team lands. Camp 1, the Chrisean camp, is running a growth over grudges frame. That's the exact phrasing the Shade Room used in their most recent Chrisean coverage, and it's the frame Chrisean herself has leaned into publicly. She's told outlets, per that Grape Juice write-up, that people confuse forgiveness with weakness. That's a beautiful sentence. It is also a sentence that does a lot of work covering for a Miami boat trip that the girlfriend at home found out about on livestream. Camp 2, the Nevaeh camp, is running the loyal woman done wrong frame, which, in isolation, has a case. She is pregnant. He did cheat. He admitted it on her stream. But the frame requires you to ignore the Voodoo threats to the chat, the polygraph she admitted lying on, the $12,000 a month figure, and the fact that she's still in the house monetizing the same livestream that keeps producing these arcs. It's a frame that needs the audience to look away from half the paper. Camp 3, his evolved, this is co-parenting frame, is the one Whack 100 adjacent voices have been pushing on interviews. Whack himself, in a January TMZ update, was still framing Johnathan as a client whose brand is on an upward trajectory. But the World Star Hip-Hop breakdown of the label plus management structure, where the label reportedly takes at least 50% and management stacks on top of that, makes the his evolved frame very convenient for the people whose paychecks depend on him staying visible. Chaotic visible. This visible. Somebody's going to say, and I want to Steelman this one because it's the strongest counter, these are grown adults, this is their household, they can broadcast whatever they want, and you're just profiting off the same drama the algorithm is profiting off. Faye. Genuinely Faye. The distinction is the children. There is an infant on that stream. There is a stepson on that stream. There is a fetus whose paternity has been publicly questioned by the father on that stream. When a household ledger includes minors, the adults making adult choices defense stops covering everything. I lean where I lean because of the minors. Not because of the cheating. Not because of the voodoo. Because of who's in the room when the camera's rolling. Add a 4th camp to the map, because it's forming in real time and the mainstream isn't naming it yet. Call it the fatigue camp. This is the frame Rolling Stone gestured at in a broader piece last month about livestream fatigue and audience burnout. The idea that the same audience that built these channels is starting to price the cost of their own attention. That camp is not defending Blueface, or Chrisean, or Nevaeh. It is quietly logging off. The tell is the concurrent viewer curve on the household's Kick channel. The drama arc is spiking clips, but the sustained watch time between arcs is softening, which means the mess needs to keep escalating to hold the audience. which means the incentive structure inside that house is now pointing at bigger swings, not smaller ones. That is a framing war the participants themselves are losing to their own algorithm. And here's the new headline reality nobody in the three main camps wants to name. The Vibe recap of the Chrisean Blueface Miami footage opened with the phrase reunion tour, two words that do more strategic work than the article's whole body. Reunion tour is the language you use when you are pre-selling a cycle, not describing one. Compare that to the way Pitchfork's news desk framed the same footage. Brief reappearance, clinical, distancing, almost sanitary. Same footage. Two verbs. Two totally different implications about whether this is a moment or a movement. The camps are downstream of that verb choice. Vibe's readers walked away expecting a rollout. Pitchfork's walked away expecting an anecdote. The paper is the same, the framing is not. Let me Steelman a second counter, and this one comes not from an imagined comment but from a real headline. The Neighborhood Talk ran a piece titled roughly, Nevaeh defenders say chat is bullying a pregnant woman. That's the frame. Bullying a pregnant woman in the third trimester is a hostile audience behavior, and everything she says on stream while under that pressure should be discounted as coerced speech under duress. Take that seriously for one beat. Pregnancy is real. Third trimester is real. Audience pressure is real. Some of what she said on that stream may well have been said under conditions no reasonable person would want to be tested on. The dismantle, though, does not come from insult. It comes from the deletion chronology and the pendant frame and the semitone pitch shift and the paper gonna show it quote, all of which point at a speaker who is rehearsing her lines, not being cornered into them. Duress speech doesn't script itself. Duress speech doesn't touch the pendant on cue. This one wasn't duress. It was staging. This one is about to divide the timeline. Some of you are going to read that dismantle and think I'm being too hard on somebody carrying a child. Others are going to read it and think I let her off too easy. Both of those readings will be in the comments before the video finishes rendering, and both of them will teach me something I didn't know when I filed this. Here's the read the algorithm probably won't hand you. This isn't a love triangle. This isn't a redemption arc. This isn't even really about Chrisean walking back into a house. Chrisean's been walking back into that man's orbit on a cycle you can almost set a calendar to, and XXL has been documenting the custody skirmishes between her and Johnathan long enough that the return is just the next verse of a song we've all heard. What this is, actually, is a live stream economy that has metabolized 3 separate mothers, 4 separate children, 1 manager whose business model rewards the chaos, and 1 pregnant woman who has learned, correctly, from a market standpoint, that admitting to Voodoo on stream generates more revenue than denying it. She's not crazy. She's calibrated. That's a distinction people keep missing because the aesthetic of what she's saying reads unhinged. The mechanics of what she's saying are strategic. The Voodoo talk is content. The lie about the polygraph is content. The threat to the chat is content. The $12,000 number that got her flagged is either a receipt for what is actually paying her or a receipt for what she wants a court to believe is paying her, and either read is bad for somebody. The reason the traffic stop went the way it went, calm, no arrest, everyone home in time to keep streaming, is not because the officers were charmed. It's because the driver, at that moment, was sober enough to recognize that the entire event was being broadcast to a live audience and every word he said was a piece of admissible audio. Same for the passengers. That's why the blunt got moved. That's why the phone was where it was. That's why nobody escalated. They've all learned. That's the story. This whole household, from the eldest adult down to the toddler climbing across the couch, is operating inside a broadcast frame where every action has a monetization curve. Chrisean has learned it. Nevaeh has learned it. Johnathan learned it in prison and has been perfecting it since November 2025 when he came home. Wack's business model was built on it before any of them. The reason this looks messier than the last cycle isn't because they got messier. It's because they got better at the mess. The mess is the product, and the paper on Nevaeh, the $12,000 claim, the polygraph she admitted staging, the welfare accusations from chat, the Voodoo threat, the steps on positioning, that paper is going to matter in a family court proceeding sooner than she thinks it will. She's building the discovery file against herself, live, on camera, in front of the same audience that will one day be subpoena-able as witnesses to statements she made freely. Somebody around her needs to tell her to log off. Not tomorrow. Tonight. extend the defense of that read for a second, because the mainstream is going to keep trying to soften it. The Hollywood Reporter piece on Kick's creator economy noted, buried in paragraph 9, that the average tenure of a top 50 Kick creator is under 11 months before an off-platform legal event materially disrupts their broadcast. 11 months. That is not a lifestyle. That is a runway. Every element the team has laid out, the pendant frame, the deletion chronology, the paper gonna show it, quote, the platform revenue math, the semitone pitch shift, the Karlissa 3-question interrogation, the Miami boat rental slip, the Oak Cliff traffic stop, the milk and honey signing arrangement, is a coordinate on that runway. Plot the coordinates. The line points at a legal event, not a music event. That is, the read the press will not print because printing it requires the outlet to admit that they, too, are downstream of the same engagement math. Add a jab, dry one. Whack 100 is a man who built a career on being the loudest voice in every room he walked into, and the loudest voice in the current room is a pregnant streamer threatening her chat with Voodoo. That is not an upgrade of the client's brand. That is a client whose brand has quietly gotten louder than the manager's, and the manager either hasn't noticed yet or has noticed and is fine with it because the ticker keeps moving. Either read is unflattering. Pick one. Add another, softer this time. Chrisean, for all the chaos she's associated with, has been the quietest of the three adults in this arc. Her Miami appearance was a photo. Her statement was a sentence. Her frame is one paragraph. That restraint is either genuine growth or an extremely well-managed silence, and the distinction there matters less than the fact that whoever is telling her to stay quiet is telling her the right thing at the right time. That is the only person in this configuration who currently looks like they're being advised correctly, which is a strange sentence to have to write about Chrisean Rock in the year 2026, but hey, we are. One more, cutting. There is a version of this story where the adult with the most legal exposure is not the one on probation, not the one behind the wheel at the traffic stop, and not the one on a Miami boat. It's the one holding the microphone on her own channel, threatening chat, admitting to a staged polygraph, and touching a pendant on the frame the confession lands. The exposure surface with the widest paper trail in this house right now is the person whose defenders are calling her the victim. That is not a comfortable sentence. It is also not a wrong one, and one almost sympathetic. Somewhere underneath every performance on that stream is a young woman who is about to give birth, who has been publicly humiliated by her partner on her own platform, and who is figuring out, in front of a live audience of strangers, that the audience she thought was her community is actually her jury. That is a brutal way to spend the third trimester. It does not excuse the paper. It does contextualize why the paper reads the way it reads. Sometimes the most damaging confessions are the ones somebody makes because they have run out of private rooms to make them in. The mainstream read on this arc, pushed hardest by E! News' Blueface tracker and echoed almost verbatim by People's short-form vertical, has been the tidy reality couple in Crisis Frame. That frame treats the household like a season of a show, with beats and rebounds and reconciliations, and a soft-focus reunion in episode 10. That frame is comfortable because it is legible. The paper does not fit the frame. The paper fits a docket. Every outlet running the Crisis Couple version is going to have to file a correction the day the docket does. The likely landing on the immediate arc is this: Johnathan and Chrisean don't formalize anything, but the visibility continues in cycles of roughly 2 to 3 weeks, because that's the interval that keeps the algorithm feeding both of their channels. Nevaeh delivers the baby in the back half of August, based on the publicly announced due date, and within 30 days of that delivery a paternity conversation stops being live stream banter and starts being a filing. Watch the LLC and trademark registries in California and Texas across September. If a new entity gets filed with any of these names on it, that's your tell that a formalization is being prepositioned. Trace that cascade one step further. Once the paternity conversation moves onto paper, 3 secondary consequences follow in a predictable order. First, the child support venue conversation begins. Because Nevaeh's household of record is Texas and Johnathan's business filings historically anchor in California, the jurisdictional fight over which states' guidelines apply will be its own headline within roughly 6 weeks of the initial filing. Second, watch how Kick's terms of service response develops. The platform has quietly tightened its policy language around minors on stream through 2026, per the platform's own community guidelines page, and a live custody proceeding involving an infant born on air is the kind of test case that draws a policy team's full attention. Third, don't be shocked when the ad partner side of the household's revenue stack starts to churn. Brand advertisers price legal risk aggressively, and every new receipt that enters the discovery file is a coordinate the ad networks are watching more closely than the audience is. By late September, expect at least one brand withdrawal to hit the trade press. The wild card is Karlissa. Johnathan's mother has, for years, been the one voice in this configuration willing to say the quiet part on camera. She was the one who asked the Voodoo question 3 times. If she publicly breaks with either Nevaeh or Chrisean before that baby is born, the entire household ledger reshuffles overnight, and the frame that whack-adjacent voices have been running, his evolved, collapses inside a week. Don't be surprised if the next viral clip out of this house has Karlissa's voice on it, not Johnathan's. Extend the Karlissa cascade too. Once she breaks, the next window is about 7 to 2 hours of soft press, a shade room repost, a neighborhood talk aggregation, maybe a TMZ pickup, and then a hard press pivot. The historical pattern on her public statements is that when Karlissa goes public against a household member, she goes public with paper attached, screenshots, voice memos, timelines, which means her break, when it comes, will not be a vibe shift. It will be a document release. The next 30 days after that are a shoe drop rhythm, one receipt Monday, one Wednesday, one the following weekend, until the target of the release either signs whatever she once signed or leaves the household. That is not a prediction pulled out of the air. It is the exact pattern she has run twice before, on record, per outlets that don't usually agree on much. The failure prediction for the opposition here is that his evolved camp will still be running its frame the day Karlissa's first document lands. They will pivot within 7 to 2 hours. Watch how fast the language changes across the same accounts. The residue, the part nobody's pricing in, is Superior and Chrisean Jr. 2 boys, 2 different mothers, 1 household orbit, both being raised on camera by adults whose primary income stream is the visibility of their family instability. 5 years from now, one of them, minimum, is going to have something to say publicly about what it was like to grow up as a supporting character in the algorithm. That's the receipt that hasn't been written yet. That's the one somebody in that house should be scared of. Extend that 5U cascade too, because the aftershock has more than one wall. By 2031, the older of those 2 boys will be either school age or approaching it, and the archive of their childhood is not a showbox of photos, it is a searchable, monetized, permanently indexed video record on platforms that will still exist. Once one of them hits an age where they can type their own name into a search bar, the household's monetization curve becomes the child's own developmental artifact. The next window after that is legal. Teenagers with archives develop lawyers, and there is a live and growing body of case law, tracked by the Cut's ongoing coverage of child influencer legislation, that will make certain kinds of past broadcast material actionable in ways the current stream culture is not pricing in. The failure prediction for the opposition on this scenario is the one that ages the ugliest, that the kids are fine, they are loved, that's what matters defense that has been the fallback line for every parent on stream since the model existed. That defense is about to meet a courtroom that does not care how much love was in the room. It cares what was on the tape. And the tape is the tape. The polygraph moment, though I'm caught on that one, is the moment that ages the worst. Because in 5 years, that clip will not read as chaotic. It will read as evidence. That's the promise I planted at the top, and that's the loop closing. The reason this specific afternoon matters more than the 20 afternoons before it is that this is the one where the paper started admitting itself into the record. Somebody in the chat has to know which polygraph service she actually used, because every search the team ran came up dry on the licensing, and if she used an unlicensed examiner, that's a separate paper trail we need to pull. Drop it in the comments if you know. Alright, you all saw what you saw. The Voodoo admission, the Miami trip, the traffic stop, the stepdad line, the $12,000 claim, the lie about the lie detector. Nobody made any of that up. She said it. He said it. The officers said it. The camera stayed on the whole time. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, ring the bell so the next case doesn't get buried in your feed. Next Drop connects this exact household to a filing from last year that predicted almost every beat of this current cycle. And once you see that filing, the cycle stops looking chaotic and starts looking scheduled. Ride with us on that one. Wrap and receipt. Out.